You in that. So with that, I'm going to call Joshua Hoffert to come on up and to share what God has laid on his heart for us this morning. I'm very curious, and I just appreciate Josh is always so open to allowing the Holy Spirit to guide and lead what he's going to share. And Josh has just come off of an online conference this weekend, and so I'm sure there's lots of things brewing in your heart and your head, Josh. And so maybe. So why don't we just reach out our hands just to pray for Josh as he comes and shares, and just also for ourselves that we'd be open to hear what the Father wants to say. And so, Father, I just thank you for Josh. I thank you for my brother in the Lord, and I thank you for the gift of teaching, God, that you have bestowed upon him. And we just are thankful, Father, that you have brought him here for this season, this time that we're walking in. And so, Father, I pray as we listen to the things that you've placed in his heart, God, that you would allow our hearts to just be a sponge, to receive what you would have for us this morning, Father, that we'd be open to what you want to speak. And, Father, we just pray for just a refreshment on Josh. Lord, just give him clarity and strength, God, to step into the things that you're putting before him. And we ask this in your Son's name. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Wow. You want to know the easiest way to manipulate statistics? We have been averaging 15 baptisms a week. Okay? That's pretty good, right? My goodness, just come here and you'll get baptized. 15 a week. I love that. That's just such... my life changed when I was baptized. Like, it really did. I can look back, and I was raised in church, but it was later in my adult life is when I was actually baptized. And it was probably 10 years ago now. Yeah, I think this year, 10 years ago. Actually, probably right around this time 10 years ago, now that I think about it. It's 2012. So anyway, that's just it's an exciting thing to hear about so many people. Baptism is more than, it is a public declaration of faith, but it's more than that. I mean, baptism is what the church has always called the sacrament. The sacrament is making a grace that we don't see visibly seen. And so when we baptize people, the grace of new life and transformation is something we are making visibly seen. Something that's communicated invisibly to us. And so it's just a beautiful thing to see that. I was, just as we were talking about that, I was reminded of some statistics that are, this isn't manipulating statistics, that our friend Benito from India sent me not that long ago. He's part of, you guys remember Benito, maybe some of you do. The last time we had him here was probably 2019 because of COVID. And the last time I was there was early 2020. But we've supported the work that's happening, church planting, training church planters, training leaders. And two things he sent me recently. One of them is an update on the story of a man named Wilson, who, when I was in India last, Wilson, some of you guys are going to remember this. Wilson is in the state of Goa. And he, at this point, this was early 2020, had, in the last 18 months, planted 21 churches. And Wilson did not have a vehicle. So he was walking to each one of the places that he had planted a church. And so in order to get Bibles to people, and the way you're planting, you're not like, this isn't like, well, let's get people from the church down the street to come to our better program. That's not the way it works there, okay? This is, we're sharing the gospel, and people are getting saved. And so for him to deliver Bibles to the people that are new believers is quite an onerous ordeal to him at that point. So the church here, SCC, had sent some money, because it's easiest to get funds over to India by using direct cash, and say, here. And so we directed the funds to Benito to purchase a scooter for Wilson. And so Wilson had to spend about 6 months actually getting a driver's license. He didn't even have a driver's license. And so I had a picture, this was back in 2020, Benito had sent me a picture of Wilson proudly standing next to the scooter they had bought, and now he's able to ride the scooter and deliver Bibles to each one of these churches. And Benito sent me an update just the other day about Wilson. Wilson is now traveling around India training church planters. And Wilson is, his history, he was a notorious stutterer. So he was super insecure about actually standing in front of people and speaking. You know, it's a funny thing that God does, right? I think it says somewhere in Scripture that he uses the foolish things to confound the wise. And so Benito sent me pictures of Wilson standing in front of groups of pastors, teaching them about planting churches and sharing the gospel and getting people saved. And so it was just a beautiful thing. And so Benito had sent me some statistics because he does a lot of the tracking and the networks for the statistics that they're working within. In some of the networks they're working in from the statistics last year, and I want to share these with you because we've said this a bunch of times. Like last week when we were taking communion, I said, we're participating in the life of the church corporately, not just SCC, but when we take communion, we're entering into the grand narrative and the story of Christ's life that's being shed abroad all throughout the world. And so these statistics, like, you know, our 15 baptisms a week statistics, we can roll into the statistics that Benito's sharing as well because we're all one church. Benito shared this with me. Last year, he was able to track 16,377 gospel shares. That's pretty cool. So just on the streets, we're sharing the gospel. Some of you came when Benito was here, and he did a presentation on one of the evenings about how to share the gospel, and we practiced with each other. So of those 16,000, 6,542 accepted Jesus. So 6,542 new believers. There was 688 baptisms within that network, and 230 churches were planted. I love that stuff. I love that stuff. That's amazing. And you know, it's been prophesied of India, and this is something they tell me every time that I talk with them. It's been prophesied that India would be the greatest missions-sending nation that the world has ever seen. Because they're the recipient, right? At this point, they're the recipient. But they're starting to look at North America, and they're going, what a mission field. What a mission field. Let's start sending people to North America to plant churches. Let's get North America saved. They don't even know what their own country, and they're already starting to think of us. And so I love that. And this is, we celebrate because this is the true meaning of the word Catholic, right? The church united, the church across all fronts, across all creeds, across all nations, across all ethnicities. And so, you know, I'll text him back and I'll say, hey, we got 15 baptisms a week going on, man. You need to catch up. Just some holy jealousy there. There's a couple things I want to talk about this morning. And, I think couching all that I want to talk about this morning we've been doing this webinar this weekend on healing the wounded heart. How many of you know that we all have wounded hearts? Yeah, those of you who didn't raise your hand, well, you'll find out one day. We all do. And so what I wanted to talk about this morning kind of as an overall is how recovering from abandonment, healing from issues of abandonment. Because all of us have to some degree struggled with abandonment or rejection. We don't even actually know kind of the way those roots play themselves out in our lives. Each one of us, this is going to make Phil way happier if I put this thing right in the middle. Is that the middle? Anyway, whatever. That's where the X is, right? They've got an X here to make sure I don't go that far. Okay, what was I saying? That's squirrel. Each one of us, how many of you know you guys have a family that you grew up in, like it or not? Do you have a family that you grew up in? And your family has particular characteristics and particular relational styles, and some families have really healthy, good boundaries. They have really good, healthy family togetherness, way of connecting, and some families don't. And there's a spectrum in between all those things, from the most hyper-dysfunctional family to the most functioning, loving, healthy family. We all have spectrums in between there. And and I've got news for you too. The most loving family, the healthiest thing you could ever picture is still going to have problems because humanity has problems. And so each of us, as we're raised, we are raised and taught particular skill sets. And you think about when a child, like when one of my kids skins their knee, and my responsibility as a parent is not to yell at them and tell them that they are, useless or whatever. My responsibility is to help them recover back to themselves, help them become themselves, and comfort them and console them. And sometimes, for some of you, that didn't happen. So you have missing gaps in your formation. You have ways that you were taught where you kind of have missing information. So when I'm hurt, how do I come back to myself? How do I draw back from that place of hurt and come back to who I am and be myself? Some of us totally missed that. Some of us got it. Some of us totally missed that. Those aren't skills that you can learn in isolation. Those are things that you're taught. And actually, we'll look at the Gospels in just a second, because there's moments where Jesus is busy teaching his disciples those kind of skills, the things they actually lack. And he was saying, no, these are the kind of people that we are. And you can only learn those things in the context of community. You can't learn them by yourself. It's impossible, because if you don't have someone show you, how can you come back to yourself? You can't. And it becomes so foreign to us that we don't even realize that we're doing it. And so when we wrestle with wounds of abandonment, one of the most direct responses is we go into enemy mode. Enemy mode is some person has done something or said something that I don't appreciate, and so what do? I turn them into the enemy. And so I can reject them and hurt them and keep myself protected. And so what happens is we externalize the threat, and we say the threat is that person, but actually the threat is my own heart. Because my heart is the thing that's damaging myself. And again, we're going to look at Jesus and how he helps his disciples in a particular instance process through that. I want to tell a story and kind of characterize how we wrestle with these things. And here's a significant example. Of course, because I'm speaking, you're going to get a story from the early church. So, here's this. If you ever have a chance to pick up this book by Benedict Award, it's called Harlots of the Desert. Yes. So it's not a romance novel. Kind of sounds like it would be, doesn't it? Yes. In the early church, there was a number of stories that revolved around people that had been wrapped up into prostitution and that were brought back into relationship with Jesus. And so these stories became very popular. But there's this one story of a man named Abraham he had a niece named Maria. And Maria, her parents died. Her parents were very wealthy, and her parents died when she was 7 years old. And Abraham found out and she'd been given the inheritance of all this wealth. Abraham finds out about Maria, and Maria is committed to his care. Now, Abraham lives the life of solitude. He's living the monastic life in the desert. And so he takes Maria under his wing. He builds her own little dwelling place right next to his, and he begins to teach her the monastic life and take care of her. And together they distribute all the funds, the inheritance, they distribute them to the poor, to feeding everybody in the region. And so he's teaching her the gospel from a young age. Now, for about 20 years, she lives next to him, and she's learning the spiritual life. She's growing, and people are starting to recognize that there's this very godly, saintly woman here, and people are coming to there, and they're getting advice and direction. And this particular man starts coming over about a year, and he begins to woo Maria. He has ill intent. And throughout the course of the year, at one point, Abraham leaves for a small retreat into the desert for a couple of days. And this man comes, seduces Maria, and Maria falls. Abraham comes back from his time in the desert and realizes Maria's no longer there. Are you guys tracking with me on this story? Abraham had a dream in the desert. I won't go into the details of the dream because of time, but he had a dream in the desert when he woke up and realized, Maria's in trouble. I need to go to her. But by the time he got back, she had already left. So Abraham doesn't know what's happened, but he knows something has happened. And he spends 2 years trying to track down what happened to Maria. And he puts word out, and he's going to the people that he knows and says, is there any word of Maria? Can you find Maria? And eventually he finds out that she's in a particular city. Again, 2 years have passed. Actually, I won't go there. 2 years have passed. And he finds out that she's in a city, and she is living in a brothel. And so she has dedicated her life to a life of prostitution. And Abraham dons a suit of soldier's armor, knowing that he'd never get into the place dressed as a monk. He's smart that way, I guess. And disguises himself. And so he makes the trek. He's an old man at this point. He makes the trek to the brothel and hires Maria. And so you think about this. A man from the desert, a well-respected Christian monk who people had been going to for insight, for wisdom, for prayer, for decades, can now be found in a brothel. You think about the reputation hit that this guy would take from doing that. So he's in the room with Maria, and she doesn't recognize him because he's dressed as a soldier. And I want to just read this passage to you. It's a bit, it's maybe a whole paragraph, so bear with me. When she had locked the door, she came towards him, and the old man said to her, Mistress Maria, come close to me. And when she had come close, he held her firmly with one hand, as if about to kiss her. But snatching the hat from his head, in a voice breaking with tears, he said to her, Don't you know me, Maria, my child? Dear heart, am I not the one who took care of you? What happened, my dear? Who hurt you, my daughter? What has become of the dress of angels that you used to wear? What has become of your virginity, your tears, your vigils, all your prayers? From what a height you have fallen, my child, into such a pit as this. Why, when you sinned, did you not tell me? Why could you not come and speak of it with me? For of course I would have done penance for you. Why did you not do that? Why instead did you hurt me and give me this unbearable weight of grief? For who is without sin save God alone? While saying this and much besides, Maria sat like a stone between his hands, overcome by both shame and fear. In tears the old man said to her, Why do you not speak to me, my heart? Have I not come to take you home, my child? On me be your sin, my daughter, and on the day of judgment I will render an account of it for you to the Lord. It is I who will be responsible for this to God. After a while she plucked up the courage, and weeping she said to him, I could not come to you. I was so very much ashamed. How can I pray again to God when I'm defiled with sin with sin which is as filthy as this? And the holy man said to her, Upon me be your sin, Maria, and let God lay it on my account. Only listen to me and come, let us go back to where we belong. My dear, do not draw back from the mercy of God. I love this. To you, your sins seem like mountains, but God has spread his mercy over all that he has made. God has spread his mercy over all that he has made. See, Maria, she obviously falls. And think about this, okay? She's 7 years old and she loses her parents. She loses everything that has meaning in her life. We're psychologizing her a little bit, but we're reading into this, and I don't think it's too much to read into this. She loses her parents at 7, which is traumatizing for a child. She's abandoned. She's left alone. She has to go live with an uncle who she doesn't know all that well. Now, her uncle cares for her, but this is a serious trauma that happens in her life. She's neglected, she's alone, she's abandoned. When she makes a mistake. Rather than going to the very one who, as he said, let that sin be on me. Don't you bear the weight of that. Rather than going to the one that can help, I suspect, and I don't think it's too far of a leap, out of fear of that same pain, hurt, loneliness, and rejection, she rejected him first to preserve her own woundedness. I couldn't come to you because I was ashamed. See, when we have roots of abandonment in our life, the very person that would help us is the one that we reject. Because I can't let myself be vulnerable again. I can't let myself, because if I'm vulnerable again, I'll be hurt again. And so I go into enemy mode. I start blaming them for the problem. You can imagine as Maria's on her way to the brothel, how she says, well, if only he would have done this, if only he would have done this, if only he would have done this. And we justify and we erect walls to keep the people out that would be the very people that would read our heart and draw godliness out of it. Abandonment leaves this gaping hole, and we have no idea we're responding to it until someone begins to pull us out of it and point it out to us and to demonstrate to us, here's a different way of responding, which is what Abraham does for his niece. Actually, I would take that sin upon myself for you. The consequences of that are mine to bear and not yours. I love that. You see your sins as a mountain, but God has spread his mercy over the whole earth. I read this the other day from Greek Orthodox monk. He said this: "Know this. This is the distinct message of the gospel of Christianity, that God is love. Never assume that this world functions with love. It does not. Love is foreign to this world. You must realize that for most people, love and God are two different things. It is our mission to bear witness to the truth that God is love." I love that. It's so important as we push forward into the fall. And we're starting, Tracy talked about starting life groups up. We practice the love of God in the midst of community. And, it's great to gather on Sunday morning, okay? But I can disappear on Sunday morning. If you guys noticed, I took off right after church last week. Some people pointed it out. I had to go. But my point is, Sunday morning, we don't learn to dig through the trenches with each other. We learn that through the everyday of life. So how do I come to grips with God as love? How do I come to grips when I have areas of abandonment in my life and I don't know I'm rejecting the very people that would help me? And when I reject the very people that would help me, guess what? I've separated God and love. And so I call myself a Christian, but I can't practice what it means to be a Christian, which is to lay down my life. But I erect walls to keep people out because I've been abandoned and I want to protect myself from being hurt again. As we push into this, it's so important to be involved with each other, to have meals together, to gather together, to be with each other. I'm excited for what it means for the community here in the fall. That's my little sales pitch for the life groups. See, here's the thing. The spiritual life, the Christian life, the life of rhythm in Jesus has essentially one thing in mind. It's the destruction of your ego. The spiritual life is designed to destroy your ego. Essentially, because the ego does this. The ego places itself at the center of its own universe. And so nobody else is important as me, and so I need to preserve myself. And in order to do that, I will turn other people into an enemy so that I can justify rejecting them before they hurt me. The disciples did this. There's a great passage where Jesus really corrects this. Just look at this really quick. Luke, turn with me to Luke 9. Starting around verse 50, once you get there. There's a lot of verses and a lot of chapters in here. Starting in verse 49. And John answered and said, Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to hinder him because he does not follow along with us. Okay. This is enemy mode. All right? There's two distinct, this short 49 to 55, there's two distinct versions of enemy mode. Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name. We tried to hinder him because he does not follow along with us. Do not hinder him, for he who is not against you is for you. So Jesus is starting to correct a false paradigm. He's giving John resources to recover himself in the midst of wanting to reject other people. Okay, it came about when the days were approaching for his ascension that he resolutely set his face to go to Jerusalem. This is verse 51. And he sent messengers on ahead of him, and they went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make arrangements for him. And they did not receive him, because he was journeying with his face towards Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Again, like I said, let's reject them before they can hurt us. Okay? They aren't with us. And so, and think about the mindset of a first century Jew. Intensely protective of their environment. Yeah, in the midst of a pagan world, they set themselves apart. So that's inbred into their culture. If the person doesn't agree with my message, we'll kill them here, right? But at the very least, we reject them first. So they've learned a pattern and a character trait in their culture that says, before they can hurt us, we're going to hurt them. This is a root of abandonment and rejection. That's what we all deal with. Here it's a bit more grandiose because they're going to want to call down fire. I love how they actually think they could, too. Who knows? So what does Jesus say? Yes, do it. Anybody that's not with us, kill them. Well, Jesus has another way. He says, you do not know what kind of spirit you are of. It's a scary thing for Jesus to say. Remember, he says to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Verse 56, for the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went on to another village. So keep in mind, the people never listened. They went on to another village. But Jesus said, no, this is when people disagree with us, when people don't accept us, this is how we go about responding. He's teaching them what it means. Like, this is so practical as to, it's almost like you want to make it more mystical. It's so practical. Saying, look, when someone's going to hurt you, that doesn't mean you just hurt them first. Our business is not about destroying lives. Our business is about saving lives. And he goes, and you can hear the rest of it because they go into another villages. They might not be ready to hear right now. And so we're going to go. But we're not going to destroy. So he teaches them what it means. He's the example in the midst of them, what it means to deal with rejection, or deal with abandonment. Right in the midst of it, he says, this isn't the kind of people that we are. And it took them a lifetime to learn that, right? We still see Peter's not, it's James and John who say this, but ostensibly Peter's right there with them. But Peter's the one who would only eat with the Jewish widows, or the Jews. And Paul has to correct him for that. So they're ironing this out throughout their whole lives. It's not like they were perfect in it. But Jesus is intensely concerned with showing them what the true way is. See, here's the thing. Okay, we've got this thing in the scriptures called the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Or another way, it said everything that hinges upon all the law and the prophets, love your neighbor, love Lord your God, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? And we kind of present these as the par exemplar as it pertains to the moral life, right? Do you realize that the golden rule, as beautiful as it is, can be found in other philosophies and religions? Right? The golden rule is not exclusive to Christianity. Okay? In Christianity, the golden rule is the baseline for morality. It's like the lowest step. Right? This is what society is built off of, is the golden rule. Okay, you think about the system of laws and all this kind of stuff is designed like, okay, if you hurt someone, you're going to go to jail. So do unto others as you would have done. If you steal something from someone else, okay, we're going to punish you. The golden rule is the baseline for all of societies across the entirety of the face of the earth. The golden rule. It's not germane to just Christianity. It's a baseline moral standard. Okay, and guess what? The golden rule, and here's the whole thing. The golden rule puts the entire practice, everything, it puts you at the center. The golden rule says, think about yourself first and treat other people that way. All right? Okay? It puts you at the center. You think about yourself before you think about everything else. This is how the disciples thought. What does Jesus say? Well, let's read it. John 13:34. Turn with me quickly. A new commandment I give to you. Right? This is the commandment, the golden rule. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. That, love your neighbor as yourself means the way that I want myself to be loved, I love the people next to me. Right? That's the same principle. So this is what all of the commandments hinge themselves upon, is thinking about yourself and then treating other people accordingly. Okay? That's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that if that's your practice, it means your ego is driving everything. It means you're the center of your own universe. Okay? Jesus says, a new commandment I give you. Right? This one sums up all the other commandments. I'm giving you a new commandment. And he says this, love one another as I have loved you. Guess what? You're not in the center of that. Love one another as I have loved you. So he takes the whole thing that says you're the center of morality, think of yourself first and deal with everybody else from there. And he says, no, now put me at the center and what you've seen me do, right? Like we should reject those people because that's how we want them to, that's how they're treating us. So we're going to treat them the same way, right? But no, now I'm at the center. And you're going to love like I love. And when those people rejected us, I said, it's okay. We're going to be okay. We didn't come to kill people. We came to save people. And so when I'm at the center, when Christ is at the center, when he's the universe and not your ego, you look at him and model his behavior. I become like him rather than becoming like whatever that is over there. The spiritual life is designed to destroy the fact that you put your ego at the center, and we built all of society around it. That's fine, but that's not what it means to be Christian. Okay, it's not like I'm going, okay, man, the plant in Tracy's office is doing better than it is in mine. All right. If she's not, I know what day she has off. If she's not here, I can grab that plant. Right? But I'm not going to do that because I don't want her to come into my office and take my stuff. And so I'm not going to go take her stuff so that she doesn't take my stuff. Right? If that's our standard for morality, then we're not doing this right. It's a good thing I don't like plants that much. We put Christ at the center. Now we erect structures that keep us self-centered. I couldn't go, like Maria, I couldn't go to you, Abraham, because I was ashamed. I'm the center of my universe. We need people around us like Abraham who will say, I'll take responsibility for that. Like Abraham, it's not even his responsibility at all. I'll take responsibility for that. I'll bear the weight of that. So that you can get out of that you're stuck in your own universe, and I want you out of that. Because Christ is to be the center of your universe. He's the moral standard. He's who we look to. We need each other, as I've always said, because you help me see what it means to die to myself more and more and more. And we need Christ at the center. I need the scriptures. I need times of prayer. I need intimacy with him, that I can look at him and I can become like him. There's just one more verse I want to look at. Maybe the worship team could come up. Psalm 119. Verse 161. I mostly just want to do that so I can say verse 161. Here is a baseline principle for dealing with issues of abandonment, dealing with issues of rejection. How do we respond? What kind of people are we? What do we see in the life of Jesus? And how do we come back to ourselves when I don't know how to respond when people abandon me, when I feel rejection? Because realistically what I'm responding to is to something that happened to me when I was 5 or 10 or 15. Psalm 119 verse 161 says this: "Princes persecute me without cause." That means I'm rejected. Nobody's listening to me. "But my heart stands in awe of your word." So here's the clue in that verse. When you're wrestling with interpersonal conflict, and you know what happens when you start getting angry, anxiety over whether, can I have this conversation with this person? How many of you ever spend a day anxious over a difficult phone call? Right? Anxiety is not something you create. It's something that happens to you. Like, you've ever tried to be like, okay, stop being anxious, and then you start doing the dishes, and all of a sudden that anxiety kind of creeps right back in? You're like, wait a second, I pushed that anxiety off to the side. The anxiety is the response to the wound of rejection that's been festering for decades. Because I don't want to be hurt again. And so anxiety starts to come up. And it keeps coming, and it keeps coming, and it keeps coming. Because my response is, I'm going to push that aside because I don't want to feel it. But guess what? It doesn't really go anywhere when you push it aside. It stays there. So how many of you have ever had anger kind of just takes over? Right? I don't try and get angry. It just takes over. You've been driving and someone cuts you off. How many of you have ever gone, well, done inappropriate things? Right? It happens to you. It's not something you prepare for. These are forces beyond our control because we're responding to things much deeper than we realize. And we don't know what kind of people we are because we've not had someone show us. Well, you just drive with me. I don't cut people off, and I'll show you how to do that. But here's the beginning clue. Though people have rejected me, princes persecute me without cause. It's not my fault. My heart stands in awe at your words. In the moment of anxiety, in the moment of anger, in the moment when I don't know how to respond, in the moment when these overwhelming emotions happen, these people rejected our message, Jesus, let's call down fire on them. In those moments, the disciples were fortunate enough to have Jesus to look to right there in front of them. Our first response has to be, let me offer this moment to you, Father, that I can see who you are in the midst of it. My response is not to reject anxiety, it's to sit in anxiety and offer it to him. My response is not to reject anger, it's to sit in anger and offer it to him. I'm no longer going to let this be the thing that controls my response. I know there's something deeper here. So I will look in awe. Actually, one of the ways you could translate that word awe means I will look in silent trembling at you. And though people around me have hurt me, and I can feel all this stuff starting to rise up in me, because I want to reject them before I'm hurt, I'm going to look at Jesus. Who are you? And how do I see you today? And in that, I start recovering myself. Because I'm made in his image. So how do I get back to myself? I look at him. When I'm overwhelmed by the challenges of life, I look at him. I sit silently and tremble before him, anticipating that he's going to lead me and guide me. And he's not going to leave me alone. His word says he never forsakes me. When I see people that disagree with me or they reject me or anything like that, I'm not going to be the primary rejecter. I'm not going to make myself the center of the universe anymore. I'm going to let the spiritual life have its work in me and destroy my ego so he's the center of my universe. So I look at him as the baseline, not me as the baseline. Because that might have worked, when I was 20 and I could ignore things, but it doesn't work today. So let's get to work on putting Jesus at the center. Why don't we just stand? If we could have prayer teams, I know, with the youth gone and all that, there's it's a bit smaller today, but if we could have some prayer teams up here. If you've been wrestling with that journey of these things just seem to happen to me. And it's like forces beyond my control that make me act in a way that I'm not this way normally. There's this dissonance between how I act and who I see myself as. And I can't quite pinpoint what it is, but I know it happens to me. And it could happen in small instances, it could happen in big instances. But there's an opportunity this morning to say, I don't want to be the grand determiner of how I respond. I want Jesus at the center. And again, we need each other. And so let's respond in worship, but there's people to pray for you. If you're wrestling with that, how do I get outside of myself so I can find myself again? Well, realistically, you don't find yourself, you find him. Because he's the center. Right? The only person that's going to gain their life, Jesus says, is that one that loses it. Well, we lose it by finding him. And then we begin to become what he created us to become. And so if that's you this morning, just invite you, just respond in worship, come down. There's people to pray for you and to help you find how, whether it's prophecy, whether it's healing, whether it's just a touch from the Holy Spirit, because, encountering his presence is absolutely crucial, especially in the day and age we live today, as you're bombarded with messages about who you should be. Well, if the Father's here, he's present. So let's respond, and I'll just invite you to come receive prayer.